isn't necessarily for students of mine, but it can be helpful for anyone. We're going to talk about asking for feedback from other people. It's important to pay attention to what part of the writing process you're in, and who you ask and what you ask them for. So this video, like I said, isn't for my students necessarily or only. I know that some of my videos have been getting shared to places like Reddit, especially regarding, the RICE model for peer feedback and that sort of thing. So because I care about affirming people's existing resources along the way and not just smashing them with feedback or giving them fix-it feedback. Okay, so we want to pay attention to what part of the process we're in. I am going to borrow from this blog entry on beta readers and alpha readers and copy editing because I find it helpful. But just so you know, so some of what I talk about will specifically connect it to publishing will be there, and the rest will be just general considerations. So let's start with general considerations. First, if you are at the very early stages of your writing or whatever stage, you need to be careful how you ask for feedback. Most people are trained because of generally, most people come into a feedback situation trained to give fix-it feedback at the sentence level. That is closer to copy editing than anything else. If what you're trying to do is share an idea or a concept and see if and ask someone if they think it works, make sure to tell them that at the very beginning. Say, I don't want you to tell me anything about sentence level grammar. That's not where I'm at. What I'm trying to see is, if it's a story, do my characters work? If it's an essay, do my ideas make sense? Is it logical? If it's story, does it follow an arc that you can track with? So get their attention off of sentence level things if they are at the very beginning stage of feedback. So if you've only done one draft and you haven't really edited it much, tell them that ahead of time and tell them not to focus on sentence level stuff, that you're not interested in it, because at the early stage in a writing process, things are molten, even word choice. You should, it is generally recommended to clean it up a little before you send it out, just to make sure that it's readable and understandable. And so do that to the best of your ability, but if it becomes a burden or a stress, stop and just tell them ahead of time, I have not done this yet, but if you'll take a little bit of time to scan this or a little bit of time to consider the big picture ideas, if you could, that'd be great. That kind of conversation will keep you from getting a bunch of fix-it feedback where your reader didn't know what you wanted them to focus on. Your reader may not have understood what level of draft it was at. If they think you're giving them something and they're in copy editor mode, that's not going to go well for you, because then you'll get this piece of writing that you care about the idea a lot, but you didn't spend time on the sentence level yet because you weren't sure if it was worth investing in. And then the reader then might be upset that they thought you were at a different place. Again, people's default is to do sentence level grammar correction based on specific social norms, which I've already talked about in my redefining grammar video and my PTS for writing video. So you want to be aware of that. So if you are at the early stages, tell the person that. Say, ignore my punctuation, ignore my spelling. I want you to look at the big picture story arc. I want you to look at the big picture logic and ideas. I know I still have to finesse this, so make those things ahead of time. And so then as we push into the next stages, so if you've had the basic idea checked, and you have gotten to a place where there's a full, maybe it's a full first draft, maybe you've cleaned it up some, that would usually fall under sometimes what's called an alpha reader. You've got a manuscript. The alpha readers are still not there to do copy editing. Again, they're trying to help you make sure that the general movement of the story or the general movement of ideas is working. And again, this is earlier in the process. So you have to remember that writing is a process. There are multiple stages and steps, and it should start with idea generation, then revision, and then cleanup. You don't want to do cleanup if you're still generating ideas and making sure that it's framed big picture the way you want it to. So you have your first round. So you have your first round of readers, and sometimes that first round is a couple cycles. At some point you get to a place where you think you've got a fairly clean manuscript, And so then you'll want beta readers involved, not people looking at first drafts or still fairly molten drafts. Beta readers are there to still look at big picture stuff. They are still not copy editors. They are some of the end people to say, do my ideas still work? Does the story still work? And is it generally readable? But they should not be going sentence by sentence, because that's copy editing work, and that's a different type of reader. One cares about big picture story, characters, logic, structure, argument, that kind of thing. And the other, a copy editor, cares about, is it readable, understandable, and clear based on specific sociocultural norms and publication norms and that kind of thing. And so there's a big difference between these roles. And so you want to be careful how you frame what kind of feedback you want, and what and how you frame how you ask for that, and at what point in the process you request that. So be aware that there is a writing process, and if you are a reader, you have to be just as sensitive to this as your writers. So if someone calls you and if someone says, hey, can you give me some feedback on this, don't assume that you are supposed to be giving sentence level feedback. That's a default we're trained to do, and we don't really get trained to do other types of feedback unless we take a creative writing course and they talk about process, or unless we take, and even then, sometimes even college courses don't include that type of feedback training. So we need to be really careful as readers as much as writers. So it's really important who you ask, how you ask. Some people like to make a point to ask people who don't know them. There are plenty of resources. Again, I'm just going to point you to the blog for those sorts of things. But the two big takeaways for this are, one, an alpha reader and a beta reader and a copy editor are not the same things. Alpha readers and beta readers are both should be looking at big picture stuff, but and beta readers might highlight a general pattern of messiness in the sentence level, but they should not be doing copy editor work where they're giving feedback at every line of text. If they're doing that, then they're overstepping the role of a beta reader. And if you do, and so that's why it's really important to set the expectations for the writer and the reader ahead of time. That will keep the reader from getting frustrated that they have a molten piece of writing instead of a finished piece of writing, and it will help the writer keep from getting discouraged because someone's given them a bunch of fix-it feedback at a stage when things are supposed to be molten and still being tweaked on the big picture scale. So keep that in mind, and hopefully this helps someone grow through this process. Feedback is good when given appropriately. Feedback is not to make you a punching bag for someone else who doesn't know how to give constructive and healthy feedback. So if someone just tells you all the things that are happening that are wrong, those aren't good people to ask for feedback, because it means that they can't see the things you're doing right. And feedback is just as much about telling people what they're doing well as what you respond negatively toward. And since we tend to hang on to negative feedback, I think 4 times more than positive feedback, someone who is giving constructive or negative feedback needs to have that balance if they're going to be an effective reader or helping someone in their writing.